Sometimes when you're going through the job interview process, it can be extremely frustrating. And the reason why is because there are a lot of moving pieces in the job interview process. And so one of the things I always try to tell candidates is that there really are no guarantees when you're going through this process. Okay. I don't care how phenomenal your background is and how well it aligns with the role that you're applying for. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what you need to understand is that there's a lot of moving pieces. And because of that, things can sometimes get frustrating in the process because, there may be scheduling conflicts. There may be things that are taking place behind the scenes at a company that are causing delays in the job interview process. And so if you are applying for a role that you are very much interested in, even if you think you're the perfect candidate for that role, you have to understand that there are so many different things at play all at once that, hey, if you're lucky, you'll be able to kind of fly through the job interview process. But even if you're a perfect candidate, the reality is there are some factors that could come into play that can cause things to delay and that can cause you to get frustrated in this interview process. And so when those things happen, if those things happen, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on controlling the controllables. That's something you're going to hear me talk about all the time. Okay, you got to control the controllables. And most importantly, you have to control your feelings when you're going through the job interview process, because you have to understand that there are a lot of different factors at play when it comes to a company deciding to hire anyone. But especially if you're applying for some type of high visibility role, there's a lot of things at play. There's a lot of boxes that have to be checked off. There's a lot of things that have to be done. And so if you don't understand that, then you can find yourself becoming extremely frustrated in the job interview process. And then you can end up letting your feelings get the best of you. And you can allow those feelings to cause you to take actions that end up destroying your perceived value in the minds of those hiring decision makers. So what we're going to talk about in today's video is about controlling your feelings. Let's talk about it. Welcome to another episode of Career Strategies. My name is Rodney Hughes, Mr. 100%. And today's video is being brought to you by www.resumemistakes.com. This is a website where you can go and take advantage of a free resume writing course called the 7 Deadly Resume Mistakes. And in this course, you're going to discover how to avoid making the 7 deadly mistakes that cause most candidates to fail miserably when writing a professional resume. So if you'd like to learn more about this particular course and you like to learn more about how to write a resume that demands attention, then head on over to www.resumemistakes.com. Again, www.resumemistakes.com. And if this is your first time joining us, thank you so much, and make sure that you subscribe because I'm going to be dropping some great content that's going to help you advance your career moving forward. All right, so let's talk about it. I want you to control your feelings when you're going through the job interview process. So let me tell you first what kind of inspired me to talk about this. So as you know, I'm an executive recruiter, and so I recruit for some of the world's biggest organizations out there. Okay, and what's interesting is that I get to see how various different people go through the job interview process. And one of the things that I noticed is that some people, it's depending on their motivating factors and how bad they want a particular opportunity, sometimes they can allow their feelings to get the best of them in the job interview process. So one of the things that you'll hear me constantly say is that this is a game of perception. So when you're applying for a job for any company, it's a game of perception. It's not a game of fact. It's a game of perception. And so one of the things that you have to go out of your way to do is to make sure that you guard, okay, or better yet, you go out of your way to make sure that you control, to the best of your ability, your perceived value that you can bring to an organization. And so even if you feel like you are the world's greatest candidate for whatever role it is that you're applying for, what you got to understand is that even if you are the world's greatest candidate for that role, there are other things at play. There are other things in motion. So sometimes it can be difficult for HR people to schedule time on some of the key executives' calendar, right? So let's say that, okay, you end up doing a telephone interview with a company, and then that company or that hiring decision maker says, you know what, man, I want to bring this person in for a face-to-face interview. Okay, just because they make that decision, depending on the size of the company, they may not have the flexibility to turn right around and, in the next day be able to schedule you for an on-site interview. Okay. And so what you have to do is you have to be able to control your emotions in the process, because here's the thing. What you got, again, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. A company only has 3 data points to go off of when it comes to making any hiring decision. Data point number 1, what do you say about you on your resume, right? So when you write your resume, what are you saying about yourself? Number 2 is what do you do in the job interview process? So when you're doing a telephone, video, or face-to-face interview, how well do you actually go through the process? What are you doing in the actual process? And then data point number 3 is what do other people say about you? So reference checks and background checks and, all those things. And, what do other people have to say about you? But when it comes to this video here, I'm talking more about the second data point, which is what do you do? So you got to understand that every action that you take in the job interview process is giving them insight to that second data point, right? And even though the way that you would respond in this process may not be indicative of how you would respond all the time to different circumstances, you got to understand that the company is going to judge you as if the way that you're responding now is how you're going to always respond to everything. So if you allow your emotions to get the best of you in this process, when things may become a little bit frustrating and you want the process to move a little bit faster, but they're not moving at the pace at which you would want them to move, what you got to understand is you have to go out of your way to come across as, hey, it's no problem. Hey, I'm being very flexible. Another thing you're going to always hear me say is, it's easy to find skill. What's difficult is to find someone with a great attitude. Okay. And so when times get frustrating through the job interview process, if you allow your emotions to get the best of you and you take some type of action that looks erratic or seems like you're very impatient, you got to understand the perception that you are now creating in the minds of the people that you're engaging with, right? Now you're creating a perception that, oh man, this person is impatient. Man, this person's going to be a pain in my behind if he comes here and the projects that I have him or her working on aren't moving at the same pace that they wanted to. This is how they're going to respond. Like everything you do in this process is creating a perception of who you are, and whether it's true or whether it's false, it really does not matter, because perception is reality. Okay, we've all heard it before. Perception is fact. Perception is reality. It's almost never been more true than when you're talking about in the job interview process. Okay, it's a game of perception. So when things get frustrating, you have to regain your composure. You have to make sure that you continue playing the game. Okay? You don't want them to think that you're impatient. You want them to think, man, I'm so glad this guy is flexible and he's willing to work with us. And you see what I'm saying? Or this young lady is flexible and she's willing to work with us. That's what you want people thinking. You don't want people thinking, man, this person is a maniac. Okay. And what made me think about it is because I was recently representing a candidate that now, in this person's defense, this candidate was going through the job interview process and things were being delayed at somewhat of an unreasonable type pace. Okay. But it still doesn't matter. This candidate really wanted to get into this particular job, and this company just kept delaying stuff. And the company just seemed like they kept dropping the ball. Okay. And this candidate did a phenomenal job of creating momentum throughout the job interview process. But then what happened is, towards the end of the process, right, after all these mistakes continuously were being made, the candidate ended up losing composure. This candidate ended up sending an email that by mistake to the client. Okay. And I don't know. Listen, the outcome was that this candidate didn't end up getting the job. Now, I have no earthly idea, okay, if the reason this candidate didn't end up getting this job was because of that email, but I'm sure that it didn't help. Okay. And if for some reason that email was the reason why this candidate didn't end up getting that job, then it's like, you do everything right in the process, but then you have a lapse in judgment and you take action because of the feelings that you've had in this process, that frustration. And even though you may be right, you have to understand companies are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to hiring people. That's why they only have those 3 data points to go off of. So everything you say, everything you do in this process matters. Okay? You have to control your frustration when you're going through this process. And if you do a good enough job of controlling your frustration when you go through this process, it will at the very least improve your odds of positioning yourself from a perceived value perspective favorably in the minds of the hiring decision makers that you're dealing with. It doesn't guarantee you'll get the job, but it does improve your odds for sure. Okay. So again, just be aware when you go through this process, there may be many frustrating things that you end up experiencing when you're trying to get a job with a particular company. Okay. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that this is a game of perception, and you want to go out of your way to make sure that you are controlling your perception to the very best of your ability. All right. Listen, hopefully you got great value out of this video, out of this podcast. Listen, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you order a copy of my book, The Ugly Truth About Getting Hired, How to Land the Job of Your Dreams regardless of the competition. Listen, if you want to discover how to exponentially improve or your job interview skills and be able to land the job of your dreams and really be able to go through the job interview process effectively, go ahead and pick up a copy of this book. You can go to www.theuglytruthbook.com. Again, that's www.theuglytruthbook.com, and you can pick up either a physical copy of this book or a ebook version of this book. All right. Again, www.theuglytruthbook.com. Listen, thank you so much for checking out this podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it, whether you saw it via the video or whether you went to the actual podcast. Listen, continue to tune in, and I'm excited to, continue dropping new content that's going to be able to help you advance your career. All right. See you in the next episode. Take care.